Well, the show is temporarily over, but the overture lingers on, I hope. And I also hope it will give you an idea of some of the fun and frolic that was in that show. Here's the overture to Candide.
Fun and frolic. That's what composer Leonard Bernstein made of Candide, a book written in and near Geneva by a colossus of the Enlightenment. Voltaire was one of the most prodigious writers in human history. He wrote plays, poems, philosophy, science, dictionaries, histories, and countless letters. But of all his works, best known these days is a short novel, a little over 100 pages, called Candide, the story of an ingenue who witnesses or is subjected to some of the worst cruelties of humanity and of nature. War, religious intolerance, torture, exile, slavery, and an earthquake that in real life in 1755 shook Europe, destroyed the city of Lisbon, and forced many people to question the existence of God. Fun and frolics indeed. And in all of this, our hero Candide clings to a philosophy taught to him by his tutor in the baronial manor where he was brought up, that all things are for the best in this, the best of all possible worlds. Like all the books in this podcast series, the story behind the story is at least as interesting as the book itself. Like Candide, Voltaire was an exile. Forced from his native Paris, where his writing was deemed so scandalous, he was jailed for several months in the Bastille, the prison which was torn down during the French Revolution, just 11 years after Voltaire's death at the age of 83. Voltaire was in his 60s and already an internationally celebrated and infamous writer when he settled in, and importantly also just outside, Geneva, and that is where he wrote Candide. So let's take our own Candide-like adventure, although I hope it's a bit less strewn with disasters, and take a trip just outside of Geneva. If you take a bus, or drive, cycle, or even walk past the airport, over the border into France, the first village you'll come to is Ferney, where you can visit Voltaire's chateau, where he moved in his 60s, and where he hosted members of high society and the intelligentsia visiting from all over Europe. I cycled there to meet a fellow British expat and fellow former Reuters journalist David Lewis, who lives in and loves Ferney, a place so closely associated with Voltaire that these days it bears the great writer-philosopher's name. So, I'm sitting in a place called Ferney, which is now called Ferney-Voltaire, with David Lewis. David, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very happy to meet you here, Robin. We're sitting right next to a fountain to Voltaire.
Oh, I hadn't seen his head up there.
Yeah, right, his head up there. This lovely restaurant is called the Patriarch because Voltaire is regarded as the patriarch of Ferney because he did a huge amount for the village and the villagers when he moved in 1758 when he was over 60. Very old for the time already, but then he spent the next 20 years living here, building on an existing small chateau and receiving visits from famous people from all over perhaps all over the world, all over Europe at least. He was known for a while as the aubergiste d'Europe, the sort of bed and breakfast.
But you'd get more than just bed and breakfast if you visited Voltaire, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, it wasn't a huge chateau, so sometimes he had to lodge his eminent visitors outside the chateau, but he would then entertain them in his salon, do one of his plays together. He had a couple of theatres in Ferney, one in the chateau grounds and one a little bit further up, which served for a while as a tourist office.
And this podcast is about books and places in Geneva, and I'm cheating a little bit here because this isn't Geneva, this isn't even Switzerland. It's if you're coming out, and you can get here on a bus, right? From
Well, I'm closer to Geneva than most of Geneva is.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I can walk to, I'm 150 metres from the border, or 500 metres later. I mean, I walk to the station sometimes, not to the station, walk to the airport.
Yeah,
I used to walk to WHO.
I cycled here, and I went past the United Nations and all those international organisations straight up the hill. over the border, past the airport, which straddles the border, and here to Ferney-Voltaire, which is a nice little village. But it must have been very different when he arrived.
Yeah.
The reason he came here was very much connected to Geneva, though, wasn't it?
I understand that he came here to be very close to the border. He was in trouble with the authorities in Paris for sort of anonymous private eye style attacks on the royals and others and aristocrats. He was basically told to leave, and so he went as far as he could in Paris. This is right on the edge of the border with Switzerland. And so if he got even more trouble because he was publishing libelous tracts anonymously, if he got into severe trouble, he could nip over the border into Switzerland. It was also easy for him to get his stuff printed in Geneva.
So the actual border then between France and Geneva, it must have just been swampy forest land, I think. I mean, there was no airport here, there were none of these big roads. As I mentioned to David, I am cheating slightly with this episode of A Book, A Place, Geneva by coming to a place just outside Geneva. But don't worry, we'll be going to another place in Geneva later. And while the book for this episode is Candide, there's another book to which I owe a debt. It's a rollicking biography of the author called Voltaire Almighty, and it's written by Oxford Professor of French Roger Pearson. Recommended reading for anyone curious about the life and works of the great man who was born François-Marie Arouet in 1694, the son of a lawyer called François Arouet. Voltaire did claim his real father, though, was a nobleman. Voltaire was educated in a Jesuit school in Paris, where he showed a flair for poetry and even playwriting from an early age. Pearson writes parts of his biography in the style of Candide, and here is the opening chapter. Once upon a time in Paris, in the courtyard of the Palais de Justice, there lived a young boy whom nature had endowed with the quickest of wits and the most willful of dispositions. His soul, if he had one, was written upon his countenance. He was quite sound in his judgment, and he had the most straightforward of minds. His family nicknamed him Zozo. He later called himself Voltaire. While he believed in God Almighty, he nonetheless considered that there was still work to be done. God created man free, he wrote at the age of 73, and that is what I have become. Let's head back now to my lunch with David Lewis on a sun-dappled terrace at the restaurant Le Patriarche in Ferney-Voltaire. So I'm reading this Voltaire Almighty by Roger Pearson, and he says, this property offered Voltaire a reassuring number of escape routes should the French authorities ever decide to come after him. Basically, he could race into Geneva, and they couldn't get him there. Also interesting in here, he didn't just buy the chateau, which you're going to show me after we've lunched here at the Patriarche. He basically bought the kind of seigneur. He became lord of the manor here, almost with, as Roger Pearson puts it, he acquired a kingdom of his own with a bunch of people, although the new monarch's people amounted only to a handful of scruffy peasants, and his cardinal was no more than the local priest. But it sounds like he actually had a relationship with those scruffy peasants here. There was, and he, as you say, he brought a bit of prosperity to what was a real backwater.
So he built a lot of houses. We are sitting really in the old centre of Ferney, which was probably, which only really was built after he came. So a lot of the buildings around here are 18th century from the time he was here. So he installed himself here. He was safe from Paris authorities, who forgave him only, several weeks before he died. They suddenly realised he was 83 or something, and perhaps he wasn't too bad, and there were these pre-revolutionary feelings and writers in Paris and saying, well, what about Voltaire? He's been saying, good pre-revolutionary stuff for years. We better. It's like, they give people an MBE or a knighthood or something when they know that they're mortally ill in Britain.
Right, he went back and he was feted in the theatres and
he was carried on,
paraded around.
He was given gold laurel things and was paraded around, but it was too much for the old boy, and unfortunately he died not in Ferney but in Paris.
In his 80s.
In 83, I think he was,
But what an incredible life, because we talk about, the Paris authorities coming for him. Well, he spent the best part of a year in the Bastille in his youth, right? So,
well, he was a bit of a wide boy. He was making money with sort of apparently slightly phony lotteries and things like that. He's invented his name as well, His name was Arouet, and then he decided he really deserved to be an aristocrat, so he called himself de Voltaire.
Yes, de. We lose the de, don't we? This pretension.
Himself the pretentious aristocratic particule. He was a bit of a libertine, I think. He had several...
That word libertine is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because my understanding of the word, you think of more Marquis de Sade rather than Voltaire. And I think, and I was listening to another podcast, which I will link to from this podcast, which was the Melvin Bragg In Our Time.
Yeah.
He did one on Candide, which
right.
is the book that we're talking about here. And one of the historians on it said, well, he was a libertine. And Melvin Bragg said, so a bit of a rake, a bit louche, that was the word he used. Good franglais. He was a bit louche, was he? He said, well, he wasn't really louche, it just meant he was a free thinker. I think his sexual mores are interesting, but I think far more importantly when it comes to libertine, it was he dared to say stuff about, I just do not accept what society says about God and creation and humanity. Just because you say it and it's the orthodox view, I ain't going to believe it. That was very dangerous and very revolutionary, a whole long lifespan before the French Revolution, because he never lived to see it, of course. And in fact, you were saying before I pressed record that you believe he was a
closet atheist.
Because he, again and again, the thing is, he lies through his teeth a lot of the time to save his skin or to say the right thing to people. So he professes to be Catholic many times, but definitely he's anti-Catholic. There's no doubt about that if you look at his writing. But did he believe in God? I think it's a really interesting thing.
Well, he may well have done in his way. As I say, I think at the end he perhaps defined himself, or he was justly defined as a deist, believer in some kind of, but not in the church. The church with a capital C, the rather corrupt Catholic Church, which he was always having a go at.
The fish course has just arrived.
Oh, nice sauce.
He was kind of desperate. I don't know if desperate's the right word. He was keen to be accepted in some ways. He was so rebellious and so cheeky and so rude and so blasphemous. But on the other hand, he did crave, he wanted to be in the Académie Française, but he never was, so I guess he sought a bit of that in Prussia, and he became a friend of, at the time, Prince Frederick, who became Frederick the Great.
Frederick the Great and Catherine the Great in Russia. He
right.
corresponded with them. She was interested in the plans of what he had done, to his chateau. What was the layout of his chateau? She bought his library.
After he died.
Yeah.
Right from here. So the library at his chateau here was then shipped off to St. Petersburg.
Yeah. So, so what if the narrow-minded, thick royal family, degenerate family in Paris didn't appreciate him? He had, Catherine the Great and Frederick the Great very interested in him and corresponded with them.
But he kind of fell out with Frederick. Frederick had written about a benign monarchy, a king that would serve the people and not just go around waging war. But it turns out then there was a massive war, which basically he started, involving all the great powers of Europe, the 7 Years' War, which seemed to have turned Voltaire off. And he was very, as well as being anti-church, he was very anti-war, it would seem. He was horrified by those wars, which killed huge, not the numbers we know from the 20th century wars, it wasn't industrialised like that, but considering the technology at the time, just killed a huge, shocking amount of people all over Europe, and he was pretty disgusted by it, I think.
Another aspect of his activity, which I think he was proud of, and perhaps people should be proud of him, is that he defended people who had suffered injustice. He was a campaigner against people who had been, there's the famous affair Calas. He wrote long tracts to get people who had been condemned to death, who were actually innocent.
And usually for crimes of conscience. Although he was accused, I think this man Calas, this was in France, he was a Protestant, he was accused of murdering a member of his family. Voltaire thought, this is just religious persecution, and as it turned out, the whole thing was reviewed and it was agreed that this was a stitch-up, and it was all just part of the religious persecution, which he hated. The idea you could be burnt alive, burnt at the stake for heresy or for choosing a different religion was just appalling. And the Calas affair, as I understand it, also made him fans in Geneva, of course a Protestant republic, butted up against very Catholic France. He was feted again in Geneva for his political work. The writing he did, I think if you get the complete works of Voltaire, it's been one of the biggest outputs of any writer who's ever lived.
Yes, and almost all of it's gone out of fashion. I mean, because his old-fashioned rhyming plays, Alexandrides and so on, are not generally played anymore. Sometimes, especially here in Geneva, they try to kick the old horse alive and do that kind of thing. But
he wrote all this stuff. He wrote encyclopedias and histories, and he contributed to the encyclopedia being written in Paris at the time.
Diderot's encyclopedia,
and endless letters. But Candide is really the one, I think, particularly in the English-speaking world. If you ask anyone who knows anything about Voltaire, it's the first thing and possibly the only thing they would say about him.
Quite right.
Why do you think that is?
It's short.
It's a good, easy read, yeah.
It's a satire, really. It pokes fun at people who can see good in anything. The big event is the earthquake of the Lisbon earthquake. Thousands were killed. Priests and so on were saying, "Oh no, everything is for the good, the best in the best of all possible worlds." This satire of Leibniz, but also I think of the Catholic view that all these things are sent by God to, even if they make you suffer, they're making you a better person. This kind of thing.
He just couldn't accept that. I mean, there's lots of targets of Candide. Who is it a satire against? Well, the list is probably endless, and if you read, I have here the English translation with Penguin, the footnotes are great because you have no idea, even the names. He trashes the publisher in Amsterdam, the printer there, who he uses his name to be basically a pirate on a ship who steals all his money. So he has a go at everyone. But the one real target is this notion, what he sees as ridiculous, stupid notion that no matter how bad your life is, you should just enjoy it, because it's all part of God's plan. He just doesn't accept it at all. Mm-hmm. And that earthquake in Lisbon, Melvin Bragg's show talks about this, but what a massive event it was for the whole of Europe, not just because it would have actually even been felt here, I think 12 hours later or so. Literally, you would have felt that's how big it was. But it was because mass communications, were such then that the whole of Europe would have found out about it, at least the printed word some way or another. People would have heard of the news of this, which perhaps a generation or two earlier, they would never even have heard of it, about this thing which destroyed a Christian capital city. And in the book, I'll read a tiny bit here, Candide's leading philosophical light, Dr. Pangloss, who educated him back when he was a young man in Germany. I'm going to read the start of Candide just so the listeners can know who he is. The book is called Candide or Optimism, translated from the German of Dr. Ralph, with additions found in the doctor's pocket when he died at Minden in the year of grace 1759. Now, David, typically most of Voltaire's publications were published under pseudonyms, usually to avoid libel or the equivalent in those days. But everyone always knew who he wrote. There's no such person as Dr. Ralph. It wasn't written in German, it was written by Voltaire here in Ferney-Voltaire and Geneva in French. And chapter 1 says, how Candide was brought up in a beautiful castle and how he was driven from the same. Once upon a time in Westphalia, in the castle of Monsieur the Baron von Tundertentrock, there lived a young boy on whom nature had bestowed the gentlest of dispositions. His countenance expressed his soul. He combined solid judgment with complete openness of mind, which is the reason I believe that he was called Candide. Pangloss, the tutor, was the oracle of the establishment, to whose lessons little Candide listened with all the good faith of his age and nature. Pangloss taught metaphysico-theologico cosmonigology. He could prove to wonderful effect that there was no effect without cause, and that in this best of all possible worlds, his lordship the Baron's castle was the finest of castles, and her ladyship the best of all possible baronesses. It is demonstrable, he would say, that things cannot be other than as they are, for since everything is made to serve an end, everything is necessarily for the best of ends. Observe how noses were formed to support spectacles, therefore we have spectacles. Legs are clearly devised for the wearing of breeches, therefore we wear breeches. Stones were formed to be hewn and made into castles, hence his lordship's beautiful castle, for the greatest baron in the province must perforce be the best household, and since pigs were made to be eaten, we eat pork all year round. Consequently, those who have argued that all is well have been talking nonsense. They should have said that all is for the best. Everything is necessarily for the best of ends. That's the main point of this book. I think this book has 100 points at least, but that's it, isn't it? This is it. It's great. I mean, actually sitting here, it feels great. It's a lovely sunny day. We're sitting at the Patriarch, but there's a lot of misery for all humans, right? Yeah. None of us go through life without experiencing the worst misery. Yeah. Some more than other, yeah. And he's very aware of that. People are being burned at the stake just for what they think. Yeah. And he's saying, is that the best of all worlds?
Well, and I think also the message of the book, which touches me quite a lot, Candide, travels the world, suffering all sorts of injustices, injuries, and so on, and he comes back at the end, and in a way, it's what Voltaire himself, as a man, did. Il faut cultiver son jardin. Look after where you are, dig your land, plant your flowers, fructify. Don't spread things too thin by trying to travel and thinking that, actually where your life is and where it's the best is where you dig in to where you come from and make that better.
Yeah. And that's how the book ends. And it's one of the most famous lines of the book. I want to talk to you about famous lines that in the English-speaking world we know from Candide. But that line's really interesting because he's so satirical. Suddenly you're hit with, hold on, he actually means this.
Yes.
We have to cultivate our garden. He definitely means it, right? It's not a joke. It sounds silly, but it's not. He says, no, this is kind of the best we can hope for. Let me read another bit from it. So Candide has travelled the world, all kinds of adventures, misadventures. He's almost died probably 5 or 6 times. He's become the richest man in the world. He's lost it all and it's been stolen. The love of his life has been lost, probably killed, not. And he finds himself back, I think they're somewhere near Istanbul at this time, right? He has a tiny bit of money left, enough to buy a plot of land and somewhere to live. And he's back with Pangloss, who also has seemingly died several times in the book, but even poor old Pangloss is back. And they're there in this place. And during it, sometimes Pangloss would say to Candide, all events form a chain in this. Sometimes Pangloss would say to Candide, all events form a chain in this, the best of all possible worlds. After all, had you not been expelled from a beautiful castle with great kicks to the behind for the love of Mademoiselle Cunégonde, and had you not been turned over to the Inquisition, and had you not roamed America on foot, and had you not run the Baron through with a fine thrust of your sword, and had you not lost all your sheep from the good land of El Dorado, you would not be sitting here now eating candied citron and pistachios. That's well said, replied Candide, but we must cultivate our garden. It's basically saying, enough, just shut it with this nonsense, right? Although Candide is a beautiful ingenue, and he remains it to the end. So that's all good. He still respects this, this idiot guy who spouted all this nonsense. Sure that he's right. Candide still respects him because he's such a respectful, nice, he's the loveliest person you're ever going to meet. Oui, merci. I could do a dessert. Yeah. Our literary musings interrupted by dessert there, and to burn it off, We walked up the road from Le Patriarche restaurant through the village to Voltaire's chateau, where he lived with Madame Denis, the second really long-term relationship of Voltaire's life. Madame Denis was, in fact, Voltaire's niece, the daughter of his own sister. Previously, and perhaps more significantly, Voltaire, who never married, had a long relationship with Émilie du Châtelet, a prominent mathematician and physicist who translated the works of Isaac Newton into French. David and I stroll through the chateau grounds in search of what is rumoured to be there somewhere, the writer's heart. Isn't that his pyramid?
Yes.
In there?
Yes.
I've read about
So
it.
I think it's possible that his heart may be in there. I'm not sure.
So what we're looking at is a chapel,
Yes.
and embedded into the wall and sticking out is it's a pyramid. It's made of kind of whitish stone with an urn at the top, which potentially, who knows what's inside of that? It would fit a heart, certainly.
And this was the chapel of the little local church that Voltaire objected to when he bought the chateau, because it was spoiling his view.
Right.
So he moved it, which caused a big uproar among the villagers, who, although he was patronising them, thought, what the hell's he doing? So he had to move it back again. And then there's this plaque there, which people have interpreted as showing his big-headedness. You see how little the word Deo is for God. Yeah. Deo erexit Voltaire. So Voltaire erected this for God, and Voltaire is much, much bigger in letters than God. And so MD is 1771. No, 1761 rather.
Yeah, so we're looking at, so this is the chateau I'm looking at, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lawn. We're looking at a house of, I guess, really 2 stories plus this kind of attic. What do you call that?
Well, it's the attic for the servants. Probably.
Yeah, probably the servants' quarters.
Chambre de bonne.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a nice old place, isn't it? With the columns, the steps leading up to the front door. Not enormous, I wouldn't say. That's.
And I think when he bought it, it was missing these 2 wings, so it was much smaller and more modest.
That's a nice. I mean, you can see why he wanted to move to the church. It is quite a pretty church. Who knows what it looked like when he first moved in?
Yeah.
But yes, there would have been a much grander sweeping view that he was after. Why he wanted to knock it down.
He's still got a good one. We'll see from a terrace that was built by some of the later, an addition, an add-on that was built by some of the later owners. So it's a beautiful site above Ferney and below the Jura and opposite the Alps. We'll perhaps go inside.
So we're inside the house now, and you've seen exhibit showing the gallery of some of the people who visited Voltaire here. Who do we see? Stendhal, Boswell,
Gibbon.
Yeah, is that the
historian?
The right before the Roman Empire. So we're in a room here, which has a glass case. There's no label on it, but it has on a little cushion a laurel wreath, a laurel crown. I'm guessing, I'd like to think this was what was put on Voltaire's head as he returned to Paris triumphantly, finally, after years of exile. And there are pictures, there are etchings on the wall here of him having the crown of laurel leaves put on his head. Oh, now we're in a bedroom. This is splendid.
This is his bedroom, actually.
You think this is his bedroom?
A small one.
So we have a small bed, quite high. It's got curtains. You always complain of the cold here, I understand, and he liked having the curtains, and he would often wear these big house coats.
And he's got a nice stove here.
Oh, that's a stove, is it?
Yeah.
That's very pretty. So it's kind of blue marble with gilt on it. And
I think,
how would you stoke it?
Well,
That must be.
I think that there's a system of these kind of stoves, most of them with tiles, which sends air
through these ducts.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this was his bedroom, yeah,
nice.
Quite cosy actually. Nice view out to the back garden. Yeah, only room for one, I would say. At this age, I think his sex life was over.
Do you think so?
Well, look at the state of the bed.
No, but his niece had much bigger rooms, and perhaps a bigger bed. Who knows?
Okay, a chaise longue. Don't sit on it. It says we won't.
I found his heart, Robin.
Okay. Right.
Here on this little monument.
Wow.
This is son esprit est partout et son cœur est ici.
It's like a little kind of pyramid type thing, but inside the house, with an urn, a couple of urns on it in it's marble, gilt, and yes, his spirit is everywhere. His heart is here. You think it's in there then, actually?
Let's not question that. It's a nice
No.
story.
His spirit is everywhere. His heart is here. Voltaire's chateau in Ferney-Voltaire, where you can visit the great man's boudoir, his garden, very important to the story of Candide, and even apparently his heart. But there is another place in this episode of A Book, A Place, Geneva, and it is in Geneva itself. Before Voltaire moved to Ferney, he bought a house in what was then the outskirts of Geneva. It's now the property of the Library of Geneva, and it's called Les Délices. It's preserved as a centre for the study of Voltaire's works. It's occasionally open for guided tours, often led by Lucas Alpin, a Voltaire expert who agreed to talk to me in the reading room at Voltaire's house here in Geneva. So I'm in Les Délices with Lucas Alpin.
Lucas Arpin, yes.
Hi, Lucas.
Hello.
So we're just discussing what you do here at what is Voltaire's house, and you talk to the public and you do guided tours, because I came on one of your guided tours here.
Yes, thank you.
If you had a visitor here and wasn't really sure who Voltaire is, what would you tell them?
Well, we immediately create the link with the institution I work for, which is the Library of Geneva, the Patrimonial Library. So we're officially a historical place, although we still are alive today and we're working towards the future because we have a very big collection of books and others that date from the 16th century to today and onwards. So, and the house you're in now is patrimonial too. It's preserved, it cannot be destroyed, and it has this historical importance. So that's the first link, the first information I give visitors here, is that this house is important because of a major historical figure who lived in it, Voltaire, and start talking about this 18th century of enlightenment. And often what I like to do, as I'm here to transmit contents to public and make it interesting and relevant for them to hear and now, I like to create links between the past and today, so also explore the heritage of the Enlightenment century thought on the impact it has today.
So why did Voltaire, who was French, who was from Paris, why did he come and buy this house?
So when he came here, he was already 60 years old, which is quite advanced in his age, and he already had quite a reputation, not very good, depending on who you asked. He was not welcome at that time in Paris, in France. The king did not appreciate him. He had already been censored a lot. He had been imprisoned in Paris too. He had been exiled at one point. So he was at odds with the royalty. And he had also lived 2 or 3 years in Prussia with Frederick II, who had invited him as a kind of counselor because he was interested in Voltaire's thought, and this did not help Voltaire's reputation in France, because Prussia is more or less an enemy also of the empire. So the relationship with Frederick II also was quite tense. They didn't have the same personality. And at one point, Voltaire left. And at that point, he didn't really know what to do. But he had a link with Geneva because it was a big editorial center, produced many books. He had links with the family Cramer, who were editing some of his books already. Geneva was an independent republic. So, it was Protestant already, but it was far enough from Paris to avoid Voltaire having too much trouble, and central enough for him to stay, I'd like to say, because he wanted to meet people, to welcome people, so it wasn't too isolated. And that's how he arrived here. He had these links with big families of Geneva who interceded for him to buy the house, because just for the little story, Voltaire was officially Catholic, even if he was mad with the church, but he had to have an official faith. And here in Geneva, I was Protestant. A Catholic could not buy property. But it was already Geneva. He had money, Voltaire, so he gave his money to the Tronchin, famous family, who bought this house. It was a secondary house of another big family, and they made him sign a paper where he was allowed to live here until his death, although it belonged to him, the money. And but he just stayed 5 years because it was a bit small. I don't know what you think. And he quickly discovered this ruined castle in France, in Ferney, and he bought it, built it, much bigger than here, and then he moved out and sold the house to the Tronchat.
Right, who officially owned it anyway, according.
Exactly,
So,
yes.
But he got his money back. He renamed the house, is that right?
Yes.
This is called Les Délices, which, how would that translate into English?
The pleasures,
The pleasures.
satisfaction, and
Yeah, interesting.
anything good. We're in the neighborhood of Saint-Jean, Saint John. And at the time, this house was called La Villa Saint-Jean, the Saint John house, if you want. And considering Voltaire's tense relationship with religious institutions, he was not very happy to move into the neighborhood of a saint. But as it was the countryside at the time here, now it's very urbanized, have many buildings, but before there was not much in this area. Geneva was contained in the barriers, the walls that used to contain it. And so there were lots of plants, flowers, and he thought it would inspire him for his writing. So he renamed the place His Pleasures, Ses Délices, and the name stayed.
Ah, Ses Délices,
Exactly.
his pleasures.
He used to say Ses
Okay.
Délices.
We call it Les Délices.
Yes.
Why did he leave here? You think it was just too small and he wanted this chateau? Is that?
So I don't have personally the exact details on why he left. I give you some little stories on the fact that, maybe it was much bigger over there. He could have more influence also, because he did have difficulties with Protestant Geneva. Notably, one of the first things Voltaire did when he came in this house was to invite an actor friend from Paris to rehearse one of his plays, because Voltaire wrote many plays. And they did a performance here at Les Délices, in Protestant Geneva, where theater is more or less illegal at the time. They're not very much into this kind of entertainment. So as Voltaire is kind of provocative, he decided to do something that was not allowed. He even invited authorities at Geneva to come and see what was happening. So they might have been surprised, but some came. And in a letter that Voltaire wrote the next day to a friend, he was happy because apparently they had moved the spectators. He laughs at the fact that Catholics, himself and the actors, made Protestants from Geneva cry from emotion.
What was the play, do you know?
It was a play called Zaïre that he had written 20 years prior, that had already been shown in Paris. So he wanted to do it here with the same actor. And so, of course, Geneva condemned what Voltaire did the next day. They said it's not good what he does. So he was kind of discreet here, but it was his house. He could do things in private. Right. But maybe he did feel a kind of inhibition. And going to Ferney in France was much easier for him. He did lots of theater over there after.
So for today's listeners, the idea of it being Protestant, most Protestant countries these days have theatres, but this was Calvinist Geneva. It was a very kind of Puritan form of Christianity, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, they weren't very much into these kind of entertainments.
Right. Candide was written here, perhaps in this room where we're sitting right now. Do we know?
Possibly. I think he moved around the house, but we have a desk on which he would write. So certainly parts of Candide were written on that desk in the exhibit.
Can you show me the desk in a
Yes,
moment?
I can show you after.
When we finish this. Why is Candide the book? Because we're looking in his library here, or not his library, the library dedicated to him with all these studies. We're surrounded by tens of thousands of books. And I believe these blue ones, this is the complete works.
Yes, it's the latest edition of his complete works.
Right, which, goes floor to ceiling over two bookshelves here. He wrote so much, yet this tiny book, which I'm holding here, is the one that's really famous around the world in French speakers or English speakers or anyone else. Why do you think Candide, which he wrote here, has become or remained such an important work?
Yeah, so Voltaire is very prolific in his writing. He did historical studies, poetry, theater, and he's one of the authors of the time who explored ideas through fiction also. So I think theater for him was a way of sometimes moving around censorship Many of his plays, stories would take place in other cultures or geographical regions, and it was maybe a bit less clear, at least when he was in France, if he was criticizing somewhere else or his own country. So I think he enjoyed using fake stories to convey his ideas. And Candide is part of a trio of books that we call in French les contes philosophiques, his philosophical tales, which are all three fictions, but explore his ideas in a very strong way. And
what are the other two?
L'Ingenue and Zadig. Okay, and it just so happens that many youngsters in high school read, well, they necessarily study Enlightenment centuries, and at one point they're often going to read either Candide or a book of Rousseau, who comes from Geneva. So it's a book that stays very relevant today. It's quite short. It can still be read. It's not that boring even for youngsters today. I mean, they can, even the way of writing the story is accessible. Okay, so maybe that's one of the reasons.
It's very much a comedy, isn't it?
It is a comedy,
yeah.
And it has many tones because it's quite hard. The story is also very pessimistic and violent, so it can also make you sad. But it has this irony that's characteristic of Voltaire.
What are Genevans today? Are you Genevan?
Yes,
okay,
more or less.
So you can speak on behalf of everyone. What do they think of Voltaire today?
Well, anybody who comes here is already surprised to discover this house exists and to know that Voltaire lived here. For many people, it's not necessarily known. We have many tourists who come by who know, and they come to Geneva for the Red Cross Museum, for the Reformation Museum, and also for Voltaire. So most Genevans are rather surprised to discover this part of the history of their own city, and it's often it's quite compelling for them to realize how much Geneva is important, maybe on an international level in terms of ideas and history.
And also what he was writing about, it reflects on what Geneva was at the time and what France was and Europe. So it's a real investigation into at a point when Europe was completely changing, right? So if you're interested in the history of Geneva or of France or of Europe, the things he was writing are really relevant today, right? The Enlightenment, the questions of religion, the questions of how societies are formed, of royalty or democracy or whatever. There's so much in there.
Yes.
That should interest anyone with a view of history, right?
Yes, and it's maybe not as exciting per se as a theme park, for example, but even youngsters who come in, if you manage, that's what my job also, to convey this in a fun way. They often have a good time. Right. So I hope they keep also this information, historical information in their heads, and then it can be useful to them.
Could you show us the desk where maybe he wrote Candide?
Of course.
Can I bring this with me?
You can. It's in the exhibit over there.
Right, let's go.
So these were really the living quarters of Voltaire. This room is called le Grand Salon. This is where he would welcome his guests. So many other important historical figures walked on this renovated.
It's a Grand Salon, but it's actually not particularly big, right?
No.
It has a nice big fireplace with a mirror above it here. But yeah, it's modest. Maybe this is why he wanted the chateau and
yes, more space. So this room is where his niece slept.
His niece, also his wife.
So not officially his wife, but his mistress in a way. They were lovers, but it was in a way a romantic relationship with lots of respect from both sides. It's surprising today because it's same family, but she would reside here. He had a room on the first floor, and this is the furniture I talked to you about. He would use here and also in Ferney to write, with always nice decorations, la marqueterie, painting on wood. I can open it up for you.
Oh, this is beautiful.
And you could sit down here and write here.
Right. So it's the inlaid wood.
Yes,
it's patterned.
Decorations and a bit carvings in the wood.
So maybe I'm standing at the very desk where Voltaire wrote Candide.
Exactly.
It's more than likely, right?
Yes.
So, great. Thanks very much. The book is Candide, or Optimism, by Voltaire. The place is Les Délices, the house in Geneva where he wrote this most enduring work of his. The other place is Ferney-Voltaire, where you can find Voltaire's chateau. For more books and places, please head to the episode page at abookaplace.com. It has links to all the sources I used in making this episode. And if you enjoyed the episode, please could I ask you to spare a couple of seconds to give it a rating on your podcast app, maybe even leave a comment or review. And do tell any friends of yours who are fans of books, or fans of history, or fans of travel about the podcast. A Book a Place is a Spinney Hill podcast written and produced by me, Robin Pomeroy. We'll be back soon with another great story behind another great story. Coming soon on A Book a Place, Geneva.
The Large Hadron Collider is one of the wonders of the modern world.
A tunnel so big it would take you nearly 6 hours to walk around it.
Scientists have already made a major discovery, the Higgs boson. Some call it the God particle.
Science fiction? No, science fact. But CERN in Geneva did inspire author Dan Brown to make it the place to begin his Da Vinci Code series of novels. On A Book a Place Geneva, we go to CERN to discover a generation of scientists inspired by the fiction to make cutting-edge science fact.
I read the book. It had a story about antimatter, matter. I was so impressed that I thought, oh, maybe this is what I want to do in my future.
And we talked to a new generation of writers who, like Dan Brown, were inspired by CERN to create fiction.
It's like all your science fiction, film, fantasies coming true around you.
Part book club, part travel guide, part history podcast, A Book a Place Geneva takes you to the stories behind the stories. Don't miss this episode on the impact of Dan Brown's Angels and Demons. Listen wherever you get podcasts or visit abookaplace.com.